Good day, everybody. Permit Sonoma is hosting a public outreach workshop regarding well permitting regulations and construction requirements as part of this presentation being held on Friday, December 6th, 2024. On the screen is the agenda that we're going to be covering for today. My name is Alex Rosas. I'm the Engineering Division Manager here at Permit Sonoma. I'll be starting off our presentation. Joining us today, we will have Darla Pimlott. She's a supervising RAHS at Permit Sonoma, overseeing the well and septic team. We also have Becky Vermeer, senior RAHS at Permit Sonoma. We have Mary Allen joining us today, senior RAHS at Permit Sonoma. We have Judas joining us today as a RAHS at Permit Sonoma, Judas Ramirez, excuse me. We have Robert Pennington joining us today, assisting with geologic, or she's our resident geologist. We're going to get started here with the presentation. A few reminders for folks that may be joining us later. Any questions should be posted to the chat, and we'll handle them as we work through the presentation, segue through topics, or at the very end for our question and answer period. So we're going to be starting off with online application processes. On the screen is our Permit Sonoma webpage. So we encourage all applicants to visit our website to start their permitting processes. We're going to be focusing on well construction permits. And I want to bring to the attention of our viewers that we have resources on our website to guide folks to our submittal requirements for all permit application types. You saw how I clicked on submittal requirements, and it takes us to this webpage. This webpage has all of our permitting services that Permit Sonoma offers. Since we're focused on the well construction applications, we would click the well and septic permits link, takes us down to the well and septic permits. We're going to open up and expand this list. We want to access the well permit and service types. And here we have the well construction permit application requirements. Notice that we have about 5 options today on our website. And what I want to bring to the attention of our viewers is we've introduced a well site plan requirements checklist. So if you click on the link here on the page, it takes you to this webpage. And we created a form WLS 057 to identify the items that should be included on well site plan requirements. And as you scroll down, we have 2 general categories of things that should be included on the cover sheets of well site plans and things that may be included as general items within the well site plan itself. Now, both this checklist as well as the submittal requirements shown on this previous page are efforts to comply with Permit Sonoma's management review study requirements. That's in essence directed us, Permit Sonoma, to create a more streamlined process and a consistent process to assist our permitting customers' needs. So we have different efforts like this across multiple application types: building permits, septic permits, grading permits, and now we have the same for well and septic permits, specifically well construction permits. So the submittal requirements are also part of our AB 2234 efforts to clearly publish and notify our customers of the expectations that we would apply for what a complete application would consist of. Some of these elements here under the well construction permits may not always apply. The one requirement that always does apply for any well construction application is a well site plan. And that goes for water supply wells, destroying of a well, or any non-water supply well like a geotechnical boring or a monitoring well. So again, the requirements you see on the screen, part of our management review directive to create something like this, as well as to comply with AB 2234 requirements to clearly state what a complete application consists of. Going back to our well site plan checklist, also part of the management review efforts and the AB 2234 efforts of providing clear information to customers regarding what is required, not only as part of the application process, but also within those documents that are required to be submitted. And again, the one requirement that always applies for well construction permits are well site plans. So we have created this checklist. We have published it and made it available to our community. The expectations are that our well construction applicants do produce well site plans that conform to these requirements. If something does not apply, it does not need to be shown. But any applicable items that are discussed here or shown here on the well site plan requirements should be shown on the well site plans. Our well and septic staff are also using this checklist as they do the plan check of well construction applications, and specifically the well site plans. So as a reminder to our applicants, if it applies, it should be shown on the well site plan. If it is not shown, then chances are there's going to be a plan check comment created by our well and septic staff asking for compliance with these requirements. Okay. Getting back to our Permit Sonoma page, how would one apply online? Well, we would click on the online permitting button here on the Permit Sonoma homepage, and it takes us to Permits Online. Here we would start a new application. Part of the process is an initial login, but I've already done that in the interest of time. We would then click on an option to access the different kinds of application options. And if you scroll down to near the bottom of this particular page, we will get to the well construction applications, which are located here. We have some information about recent developments in the well permitting world. So that's always a good idea to click on that to find out if there's any updates or get further information. I also want to bring to the attention of the viewers that if there is a well application being submitted within the unincorporated county on a private property, we have our online submittal process here with this button, Apply Now. But if there are any wells located within properties in the unincorporated cities of Sonoma County or within the public right-of-ways, then our systems are not yet built to handle the online application. So we ask our applicants to submit them via email, clicking this button here. All right. I'm going to fast forward a bit through the application process and get to the screens where we do require folks to submit information. So that's that screen. That's the application process. And then we get to this particular screen. So this is screen 4 out of 6 noted up here. The first few screens that we haven't showed are pretty straightforward. You're entering the location details and information about the applicants and the well construction drillers. But then you arrive to this particular screen. And we are asking for a variety of information on these screens. So as I scroll down, I want to explain a little bit about the information on these screens. Anything with the little red asterisks is required to be entered. And there's various options of information to be entered. Some have drop-down options, as you see here. Others are data entry options directly entered into the data field. Again, any red asterisks data field does require the information to be entered. I've already pre-populated many of the data here. And one thing I want to bring to the attention of the viewers is in this mock situation, I'm suggesting that the permit activity is a new water supply well, and that's it. We're keeping it pretty simple. There are other types of applications that might include wells with destructs only, or any non-water supply well, again, like a geotechnical boring or a monitoring well. We encourage our applicants to fill in as much data as possible, even if it really doesn't apply. So for example, in this mock scenario, the site is not within a public water system, so therefore I'm putting an NA for not applicable. There is no wells to be destroyed, so therefore I'm putting in a not applicable NA for the method of destruction. As we continue down the screens, I want to bring to our viewers' attention that we have some options like these little question help buttons to give us a little bit more information about the data fields themselves. So these 4 data fields are all relative to the conditional conditions that application submittal. In essence, what exists prior to the application being submitted to us. Continue to scroll down. We have options at this project information screen to identify whether or not the well is an emergency well. If it is, then I want to bring to our viewers' attentions that we do have the requirement to submit a emergency well letter to notify us that yes, in fact, the application does include an emergency well and the reasons for that. We also have these four data screens down here. This information is relative to what we anticipate the situation being after the well construction permit has been final. So after the work's being completed. We are working to update these screens to make them a little bit clearer, to provide information such as what we have up here with these little question marks. Continuing down along the screens, we come down to the groundwater information. Majority of the information that is collected here is in response to recent updates to our well permitting practices regarding public trust review areas. So that's what we mean by within PTRA, that's the public trust review area, as well as the groundwater use down here. We will be updating these screens, but for our viewers that are watching this presentation, the actual date relative to this data field is October 4th, 2022. And both this data field and this data field require information to be entered based on acre feet per year. Lastly, on this particular screen, we come down to the well construction data. Now, this is actually the methods of construction that we are going to be asking our customers to provide to us. We can add multiple rows by clicking on the add a row button and entering data in here. So I've already preloaded that data in the first row located down below here. Just taking an example, a mock example. The information is not necessarily always complete, but just for the purposes of the presentation, we have the information loaded. I also want to remind our well applicants that we can take up to 5 well locations for water supply wells, but we can only permit 1 completed well as part of the permitting process. So if you have a need or anticipate a need to have multiple well locations to be able to drill, we really encourage our applicants to try to do that on the front end with the initial application versus processing a revision later, which will take a little bit more time and it'll be an additional cost to perform an additional review. So again, if you are anticipating any difficulty or wanting to have some backup locations for wells, we recommend to include that with the initial application. So I will move forward through the application screens. We get to this particular screen. It's a chance to verify the information already presented. There are different edit buttons on the right-hand side. So if you feel a need to go back and edit, that's how we would do that. We'll continue the application itself. Okay, so the application has been submitted. It says here the record has been submitted. The next part of the process is uploading plans and documents. So we click on this button down here to continue the process. And it takes us to this screen whereby it's asking us to upload something. So as I mentioned before in the presentation, the one thing that's always required to be uploaded is going to be a well site plan. But I want to bring to the attention of our viewers that we have these other recommended items, and they're really conditional. So we encourage folks to review this information to determine whether or not these other items actually need to be uploaded. Is it part of the scope of work that's being proposed as part of the well construction application? So again, I want to remind viewers, if you do have the need for an emergency well, we do need that letter uploaded as a supplemental form. Any water supply wells will need to upload the level 1 conservation certification. And then depending on the scenarios for the particular well, you may need a level 2 form, or you might need a water resource monitoring application. So again, we encourage our viewers, our applicants, to review this information and provide the data accordingly, or the required documents accordingly. So in our mock presentation, I'm going to be uploading a well site plan as a site plan. So we have a document type here. And then I'm uploading a level 1 conservation certification as a supplemental form document type, which is noted above here. We click upload and validate. And as the system is processing, I want to take a moment to remind our viewers that we want to have separate files uploaded by their document types themselves. So the well site plan information should be exclusive to the well site plan itself. Any other documents like the emergency letter or the level 1 form, they're supposed to be uploaded as supplemental forms. If you do have any supporting documents or files that you want to include in the application, they should be included as a separate file, also uploaded as a supplemental form document type. So I'm clicking continue to proceed with the process. The system is undergoing a bit of a validation process to determine what to name the sheets. When you have multiple sheets, we highly encourage our applicants to enumerate them. In this case, it's just one sheet. I can say sheet 1, or to be more explicit, sheet 1 of 1. There's no preset standard here. We just want to be as clear as possible. And any subsequent uploads should retain the same type of naming convention. We get to this screen, we have the opportunity here to explain what we're uploading. And I'm going to state this is the initial site plan. And a level 1 form. Encourage folks to keep that simple and concise. Everything looks good. If I had a need to go back and make any edits, or I forgot to upload something, we have the edit buttons here on the side to assist customers with the online application process. So I've gotten confirmation here that my application and the documents have been uploaded successfully. The system sends out an automatic email to the applicant notifying them of the same. Now, what ends up happening in our process, the applicants are done with the application process. Then this sends messages over to our Permit Sonoma staff, which we have our permit technicians review and evaluate the initial well applications. They're doing a completeness screening, which goes back to the required documents that to be uploaded. If the permit technicians or Permit Sonoma staff deem the application incomplete, they will mark it as so, and they will follow up with the applicant explaining why it's incomplete and what's necessary to continue the application process. Once the application is complete, or if it's been deemed complete at the initial review, the permit techs will move it forward into our permitting process. They will invoice applicable plan check fees. And then the applicant will get an automatic email from our system notifying them that we've accepted the application and it's time to pay their plan check fees. After plan check fees are paid, then that begins a formal plan review process. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and send it over to Becky Vermeer for her portion of the presentation.
Thank you, Alex. And everybody can see the screen?
Yes, Becky.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so we're into the review of the well permit application, and you'll hear me repeat some of the things you've heard so far. So the biggest part to pay attention to that's a little different than submissions in the past is that is a site plan as opposed to a site map. The site plan, that's what's submitted to the digital plan room in the plans category, and so we want you to be aware that the site plan is different from a site map in that It may be several pages. It could be as large or small as the applicant deems necessary to submit the data required. So the site map will be part of the site plan. So this is a different from in the past where everything was just about a site map, one page. This is a much broader document here. So to guide that site plan is the Well and Septic Policy WLS-057, which is on our website as your guide. We use it as a guide for plan check review, and you would use it as a guide for drafting the site plan. So again, please note that you can use large sheets, small sheets, several sheets, whatever is necessary to develop what you deem necessary to present your site plan. We do ask that you organize and present the required data in the site plan, again, over as many or few sheets as needed, but please number the sheets. So it would look like 1 of 12, 2 of 12, 3 of 12, something like that. Okay, so this on the left is the actual copy of the WLS 057 well site plan requirements. And on the right here, let's move this over a little bit, is a sample of what could be a well permit application site plan cover page. As you'll notice over here on the left in orange, it talks about the name of the project, the site addresses. All this data was very conveniently previously contained in our old WLS 031, our old well permit application. So with a little trimming and jostling around, one could easily create their own site plan cover page that contained all of that very familiar information in one place, in addition to places to sign for workman's comp and places for the driller to sign and date the application. And please note down at the bottom right-hand corner, it's sheet 1 of 3. This is a very, very simple example. So it's only going to have 3 sheets, but you're welcome to have many more. So again, this would be the next step of that. Well, this is what we're calling sheet 2 of 3 of the well site plan. And this is regarding a vicinity map, which is kind of new, a requirement that we hadn't really talked about before. So this is an actual large, I'm going to try to get rid of this. Larger map. We ask that it be larger. On many big plans, you'll see that it's a tiny, maybe like 2 by 3 inch map. We're asking for it to be larger because we really do have to find the site and to put as many notes as you possibly can in it to let us know if there are gates, are there codes, are there landmarks we should be aware of, anything to help us to get to the site on time and be able to do our jobs as efficiently as possible for both our sakes. Okay. And then down here on page 3, this is a sample site map. And this will look a lot like what has been submitted in the past with several additions. One is a north arrow, a true north arrow. So it does have to be oriented north with a legend. So if in this case, you don't have to color code, but in this case, we did color and shape to depict what was on the map, but definitely for any kind of abbreviations or, use of shapes or color, definitely call those out what they are. There's a scale, it has to be an engineering scale. So in this case, it was 1 inch equals 60 feet. The date that the map was drafted, and in this case, it's sheet 3 of 3 of the sample site plan. This is the sample site map of the sample site plan. So in this one, it indicates basically, getting to the parcel where the septic systems are, the distances, the setbacks to the septic systems, existing wells, their GPS coordinates, the proposed well, its GPS coordinates, and then in this case, there could have been more well site locations put on our subject parcel here. They could have added up to 4 more with their GPS coordinates to give themselves more options in the field. Should the first choice of a drill site not prove satisfactory, they could then move around, but they would also be demonstrating they could meet setbacks while they had gave themselves that flexibility. Okay. So other supporting documents, and in this case, reports and materials. So this is kind of the heart of the actual well permit review. So we do look at septic systems and sewer locations and connections and setbacks. This would be a place where one would definitely pull up any records they had to support and prove where a septic system was located and where it may be a sewer connection actually was, so that the setbacks could be appropriately applied. The second part of it is for high volume wells. Those are defined within, this is the well ordinance, chapter 25B3, that it's a well intending to serve 20 or more acres of irrigated crops. Okay, a municipal well intending to serve 15 or more connections, or a commercial industrial well intending to deliver 35,000 or more gallons a day. So there are general setbacks for these high volume wells that will be here a little bit later. Okay, that'll be, yeah. And then there are known contaminated sites. This is through the GeoTracker site. So in this case, if showing the GeoTracker map indicates that the proposed well site is within one of these setbacks, a hydrogeologic study with well construction recommendations is required, and that would be submitted to Well and Septic for a review. So the study does have to include recommendations for the construction of the well with the perspective of protection of human health and groundwater. Okay, and we also look at public trust areas and well metering and monitoring briefly to recognize that they're, whether it's in or out of a public trust area, whether well metering and monitoring applies, but quite frankly, these last two pieces, public trust and well metering and monitoring, will be something that Natural Resources looks at, and at this time, that's Robert Pennington. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so that was our general list of 5 things. The first part is the septic systems. So again, we showed that the site map is critical for showing accurately located and accurately measured distances to the septic systems on and off the parcel. This is where a site review is critical, where we ask that or require really, that the driller stake where the proposed well will go and stake out the setback distances to the found and identified septic system or sewer connection. Okay, so in this case, if the 100-foot radius from the proposed well site to any septic area, if it's on the proposed well parcel, then we're only going to focus on the sewage disposal on that parcel. If it crosses property lines, then we have to look at the septic system and reserve areas on those neighboring parcels where the 100-foot radius crosses. So if wells end up being located closer than 100 feet to a septic system, but not less than 50, then it will become a Class 2 well with an automatic 50-foot deep annular seal. So you would have to submit historic septic records proving the accurate location of the existing and reserve existing systems, and that would be submitted to, it's the document section of the digital plan room, but it would also be supplemental information, as Alex was just talking about. High volume wells these are the setbacks. Their setbacks are different. So if it's in groundwater availability area 1 or 2, it's 100-foot setback. If it's an existing well in a groundwater 3 or 4, it's a 200-foot setback to other wells. Now, please note that setbacks do not apply to replacement wells, well reconstruction, backup wells for commercial wells or community wells, or existing wells on the subject parcel which serve the subject parcel. So if the high volume well will be within one of these setbacks, a hydrogeologic report does have to be generated that supports and recommends that different setback. And that too would be submitted to the well and septic section through the DPR program as a supplemental information. For known contaminated sites, this is where you would go on the state site called GeoTracker. So and locate whether So there are two radiuses. If there's a closed known contaminated site within 1,000 feet of the proposed well site, then a hydrogeologic study, either by a registered geologist or hydrologist, is required. And again, that would address the well construction and recommendations for that. If there are open known contaminated sites within 2,500 feet of the proposed well site, and this is a radius, then again, a hydrogeologic study would be required, and both a hydrogeologic study that would be generated from looking at a known contaminated site, reduced setback, would be again submitted to well and septic for review through the DPR document section as supplemental information. Okay, so one would Google GeoTracker California, simply enter the site address. It will take you to the site. You put in the radius that you want. It'll automatically bring it up. And of most importance, where this big blue arrow is you want to click on the little gray bar at the bottom that blows up this table that will list every open and closed known contaminated site within that radius. And you immediately know then whether or not you need a hydrogeologic report to submit to well and septic. So those are the three basics covering well permit, plan check review. The other two, public trust and water resource monitoring, is from natural resources, for which Robert will take over next and present that information. So here's Robert.
All right, thank you, Becky. One moment, let me share my screen. Actually, Becky, do you mind stop sharing?
Okay, let's see, it's trying to find it. It's not showing. So I brought mine in, you can see it.
Yeah, I think I can replace yours actually.
Okay, good, because my button's gone.
Okay, great. Okay. One moment. All right, thank you, Becky, for that. Yeah, so I'm going to touch on the water conservation requirements that are new as of in our last revision to the well ordinance in 2023. And then also our metering and monitoring requirements and the public trust review. So back at our page that Alex covered here, which is the minimum requirements for well permit applications, we have various requirements listed. Items 3, 4, and 5 I'll cover. So the first one is our level 1 water certification. Second is our level 2 water certification, and then last being our water resources monitoring application form, which is for wells that require metering and monitoring. So before I open those, though, I do want to point to another resource, which is on our website. So our website has the water wells page, which is nested within the well and septic page of our site. And so if you see the water wells here tab, there are various sections within that, including dry weather testing, but also water conservation, water well metering and monitoring, and public trust review. And so that's a good place to get some additional information on these topics. So if we go into water conservation, it discusses, the level 1 requirements and the level 2 requirements. It provides links to the forms, and then gives just a basic overview of those requirements. You go into the water well metering and monitoring requirements, it's very similar. Provide just a basic overview, kind of the highlights of what most folks are interested in knowing, how to enroll, and then links to the various forms that are relevant. And then the public trust review page also has some, just the highlights of that topic area, when it applies, and kind of the basics of what that review will entail. I won't dive into that at the very moment. So stepping back to the submittal requirements page, we'll start with the level 1 water certification. So this is required for all water well applications, except for applications for public water wells. So I'll open that up, take a look. So this is a fairly simple form. It basically lists the requirements, the water conservation requirements that have to be complied with in order to get a well permit. This is the responsibility of the owner and operator of the well. So all of these boxes should be checked, and that acknowledges that they're aware of that requirement, they've implemented that water conservation, or they will implement that water conservation measure. If there's no development on the site, then they can select this box for future site development, that they understand those water conservation requirements apply. And then there's the basic information about the permit, including the address and location, and then the name of the applicant. But really importantly is the owner information. We need the owner's name, owner's contact information, owner's signature, because it's their responsibility at the end of the day to implement these water conservation measures. Now, the remainder of the form provides pretty detailed instructions on each of the required water conservation measures. It provides detailed instructions on how to perform a leak and water conservation audit, how to assess if fixtures meet the requirements, and so on. I'm not going to dive into that. It's pretty straightforward. We hope that the owner uses that information and fills out that information. But in terms of what's required of us to deem the application complete, we really just need the first 2 pages of this form completed and signed by the owner. All right. Now going back to our minimum requirements, we have our level 2 water conservation completion form. It's very similar to the level 1, but this is required of just certain well permits. So it's required for well permits for wells within the public trust review area with a water use of the parcel that's greater than 2 acre-feet per year. So that, there's these 2 criteria that come into play now. Is it in the public trust review area? And then what's the water use of the parcel? So for that, before I dive into the level 2 form, we can go over to our public trust page, right? And our water wells, and then public trust review. And in there's various links, and one of those is our well ordinance map. So this is one way to get to determine if the project well is within the public trust review area or not. So I actually have that open over here already, so I'll use that. So this is a GIS viewer. Most folks are familiar with these. One of the layers that's displayed here is the public trust review area. And so if the well permit, or the well itself actually, is located within that area, which is that blue area, then the level 2 requirements may apply. So if you zoom in, you can see the parcels. You can click on the parcel and get more information on it. If you happen to be on a parcel that's on the boundary, I'll zoom out to another location because that seems to be city limits. So let's say you're considering this parcel here that is on the boundary. The area in blue would be within the public trust review area. Area that is more white is outside. So if a well is proposed in the blue and it was in the use of that groundwater use of that parcel is greater than 2 acre-feet per year, that's when the level 2 requirements would apply. If the well is proposed outside of that area on this other side of the parcel, and even though the water use is greater than 2 acre-feet per year, then the level 2 requirements would not apply. So it is based off the location of the well itself. All right. Other information on this on this GIS viewer that may be useful too is we have the groundwater availability zones here that you can, here I'll turn off the public trust review area and zoom out. These are our class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4 areas that can be useful. We also have the areas of our priority groundwater basins, sometimes are useful. Those are the Santa Rosa Plain, the Petaluma Valley, and the Sonoma Valley groundwater basin. So there's a lot of other great information on this GIS viewer. So I encourage folks to go here for information. All right, now go back to our well submittal requirements. Now, our level 2 water conservation form, we'll just open that up now. Click on that, go to that form. So it provides the basic guidelines, overview of when it's required. This first table here that you see, table 1, water conservation requirements dependent on well class. It kind of summarizes also when the level 1 requirements apply. It also summarizes when there would be a limit on the groundwater extraction for that well, or for that parcel, really. And so this is a useful table to refer to and direct the owner or operator of the well that, should they drill a well, what will be their water conservation requirements, and also one of those water conservation requirements may be limits on groundwater extraction for that parcel. So we have these different well types. Those are defined above, and then there's the corresponding requirements. Now moving down the form, similar to the level 1 form, we have checkboxes, but for the first set of checkboxes here, it's what is the type of well? So that so you're selecting, is this a low water use well, right? So that would be a well using less than 2 acre-feet per year. Or is this a well for existing use? So there's, you're drilling a new well, but there's no change in the water use of the site. And then well for that qualifies as zero net use or net zero groundwater increase. So there may be an increase in groundwater use, but that's somehow being offset through mitigation. And then so on. There's other types, including a well that would be used for diverting surface water under a surface water right, or a well that's serving a public water system. And then we get into the actual level 2 conservation requirements. So you just go through the checkboxes here in terms of acknowledging that that water conservation measure applies or does not apply, and that it's been complied with if it does apply. I won't go too much more detail there. However, I will note that there are requirements for water conservation plans, right, in the level 2 requirements. The level 2 requirements are really geared towards larger users of water. Those tend to be agricultural sites. And so a water conservation plan may be required for an agricultural site or a commercial or industrial site. So in that case, you're going to have to prepare a water conservation plan. 1 second, let me find, let me go to it. So if a water conservation plan is required, then you would prepare a plan that's consistent with our guidelines 8-2-1, water conservation, water supply use and conservation assessment guidelines. And these provide basic guidelines of what goes into those types of reports. And I recommend that when those reports are drafted, you use the same headings as are outlined in these guidelines. So you have the introduction, you have the site plan, you have the water use estimates, you have the water conservation measures, and so on. Now, also useful here in these guidelines, this 8-2-1, is a way to actually estimate the water use for the site. So in terms of determining if level 2 requirements apply and other requirements, there has to be an estimate of how much water use it is, or how much water is used on the site. And so Appendix A of 8-2-1 provides default water use estimates or guidelines for different land uses. So we have residential uses, landscape uses, agricultural uses, and then other, common commercial uses and so on. So this is a really easy and convenient way to estimate the water use of the site, and then to determine if you're above or below that 2 acre-foot threshold, and if the level 2 requirements apply or not. And then also there's Appendix B, and these are specific requirements for water conservation plans for agricultural sites. So, agricultural sites being fairly different than commercial or industrial sites, they have unique requirements. So, each of these topic areas listed below should be included in the conservation plan. So a section on soils, a section on cover crops, a section on irrigation management, and also irrigation design. And so that water conservation plan for an agricultural site should include those components as well. Okay, so back to our requirements. So now we've gotten through level 1, gotten through level 2 requirements. And now for our water resources monitoring or groundwater monitoring requirements. I'll open that up. Okay, so our water resources monitoring is required of wells using basically all commercial and industrial wells, and wells on sites using greater than 2 acre-feet per year. The only exemption is for residential wells using less than 2 acre-feet per year. So if your site is using greater than 2 acre-feet, or it's commercial or industrial, then the water resources monitoring requirements will apply. So in terms of the application submittal, the first 2 pages of this form is all that's actually required for a complete application. And then the second section, which has more details on the actual construction of the well and the type of meter that was installed, that can come afterwards. And what's really important here too is that these requirements are on the owner and operator of the well again. So we need to have the owner's signature and the owner's contact information. Yeah. So now finally on the public trust review, we haven't really touched on that yet, but there's a new requirement for certain water wells to have discretionary public trust review. And so what this essentially boils down to is a review process similar to a use permit, where prior to issuing the construction permit for the well, there is an analysis on the potential impacts of that well on nearby rivers and streams. So could the groundwater pumping of that well impact streams and rivers and impact the habitat of that stream or river? Now, there's certain, the vast majority of well permits that come in the door are exempt from this discretionary requirement. So the types of wells that are exempt are listed here. So wells that are outside of the public trust review area, public water wells, water wells regulated by the water board, low water use wells, wells for existing uses, and wells that meet that zero net increase. So what that boils down to is wells that are within, or proposed wells within the public trust review area, that area identified as, having a higher possibility of there being impacts to streams and rivers. that are on a site that are using greater than 2 acre-feet per year. And they're proposing a new well and also increasing that use. That's when a discretionary public trust review would apply. So I won't dive into the details there, but if you suspect that a well permit meets that criteria, is going to need that discretionary review, I advise that you reach out to you can reach out to me and by email, robert.pennington@sonoma-county.org, and we can arrange to discuss and determine if discretionary public trust review will apply or not. So I think that takes me to the end of what I was going to present, and I'll pass it on to Darla to talk about well construction and inspection.
All right, thank you, Robert. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about some construction standards. It's not going to be everything that is governed under Chapter 25B. I'm going to focus on just a few things here. And these things are covered under Article 2, Procedure and Construction Requirements in Section 25B-5 and -6. And so as we move through here, I will reference these different chapters. We'll also cover a couple of things that aren't necessarily in the water well construction standards, but we would like to see as Permit Sonoma entity, some things facilitated in that construction realm. So first, under well construction practices, we want to go through that plan check process that Becky did a fine job of presenting, and Robert and Alex. And once you get that approved set of plans and an issued permit, first you need to have that prior to commencing construction work, reconstruction, destruction, wells or borings. Once you have those set of plans, you want to be sure that you're following those plans. And if you can't for some reason, then any change such as a seal depth or a destruct method, or let's say you need to change the location, then that warrants that permit to be updated, and that's done through a revision. So you'll submit that revision through DPR, and we will do our best to work with the drillers to process that revision quickly, or as quickly as possible, because we know that work can't stop, but you need to keep going. So we'll want to work with you on that. If the driller proceeds forward without benefit of an approved revision, they are doing so at their own risk. Permit Sonoma staff may not be able to approve that work. Just wanted to call attention to that. We encourage, though, that when you submit that first well application or water well application, that you take advantage of the provision under 25B, where you can submit a primary location and for alternate well sites or test holes. So then you have options and flexibility when you're out there on site, that if that first one doesn't work, you can move to that second well location, third location, or fourth location. It doesn't mean that you can drill more than one well. I just want to make it clear that there's only one water well permit, water well permitted under that approved plan, but you can submit multiple choices. So one and 4 alternate sites. Before starting work, the driller should be verifying that the issued permit and approved plans match up with where they've been instructed to drill, or where the proposed well location is staked out there on site. When performing inspections, staff will verify that the driller has the approved plans on site in either a paper format or digital format, and are actually following the approved permitted plans. If work commences and the plans are not on site and construction not done per plan, then a correction notice will be given. So while we're touching on this topic, we've had some things that we've been observing, drillers changing locations, moving the well 50 feet away from the original site. There's no backup alternative sites noted on the plan. It held up the project, and then, then we're scrambling to get a revision and doing a re-review and trying to confirm whether that new location is going to be okay, and making sure that there's not any septic systems close by that new well location. It just doesn't really help get things done swiftly and quickly and safely. So revisions are really important. Drillers are told by someone out there on site that, hey, I want you to drill here, and they're not really looking at the plans, or if there's a conflict with that. So that's why we want to make sure that they have those plans out on site and they're drilling per that plan. Destructs also aren't being done per plan. There's no perforating tools out there. Seal depths are changing. So if something needs to change, it should be done through a revision, so we're all on the same page and prepared. Scheduling inspections. So we do have a provision under 25B where when you start to do that work, the driller should be notifying the enforcing agency, which in this case is Permit Sonoma, Well and Septic, and giving us an estimated completion date. So that would be done through Selectron, and you can actually schedule that 5 days in advance. So if you start work on Monday and you anticipate being done by Friday, then we can actually, get you on the books in advance. You kind of get a jump start on or in front of maybe somebody else that's trying to get their inspection. And it also helps us to determine, what type of staffing coverage we need and need to accommodate for that well seal. Staff will call the driller and work to coordinate the inspection, and will be flexible within reason. Coordination, collaboration is key. We really want to work with you, but we also need you to work with us and try to be somewhat flexible. Notification of the seal time request should be done through Selectron. Again, the same thing with the commencement of work. When you get ready to really dial in that seal time, you want to do that through Selectron, and it needs to be done the day before the inspection is needed. This can serve as a confirmation to that commencement work notification. So since there's that requirement, the drillers call that in, then we can just dial in the time a little bit better with that seal time request. Schedule inspections during normal county business days, including normal working hours. Please be mindful that Permit Sonoma staff coordinate all inspection work between the hours of 8 and 9 a.m. and will need time to complete that scheduling, and also have enough time to reach the site. So if you try to schedule an 8 o'clock seal, it's kind of impossible for staff to really meet an 8 o'clock time frame, because they're also looking at other inspections they need to schedule. They also do inspections for the septic side of the program. Also, if the inspections are too late in the day, and let's say they have an hour of travel time from that site back to the office, that has to be accounted for. So well seals that are called in for 4:30 in the afternoon aren't usually a good time of day. It doesn't allow for completing that inspection and being out there for that, and also driving back. So if you could be mindful about that. Also, once you've got that appointment scheduled, there is an allowance of 15 minutes. So if let's say the scheduled time is 11 a.m., please be mindful and wait till at least 11:15 for staff to get there. Sometimes it's difficult to find the sites. In fact, it's really important if you give us a good vicinity map and any details on how to get there. That's super helpful. Or having a conversation when you're scheduling that inspection, that's super helpful too, so that staff can get there on time. Permit Sonoma staff can also, they have other tools in the tool bag, so to speak, and they may offer or agree to do a virtual inspection through view specs, and that's could be live or it could be offline. That's where you could actually document that you're doing this well seal, for example, and upload video or pictures and have actual documentation of that work that's completed, even though staff may not have been able to be at the actual inspection. Permit Sonoma staff may also inspect the site just prior to the seal placement to view the annular space and the seal depth prior to sealing. They'll look at the sealing material and they may come back and see if that and verify whether that seal appears to be done correctly. Staff will also request pictures or videos, and that should be done through view specs. The offline version, it would probably be the best way to do that if they cannot stay and see the completed work. So again, some issues. There were inspections not being called in at all. Maybe the drillers wanting seal times that staff can't accommodate. It's too late in the day, too early in the day. Sealing material or the driller sealing prior to scheduled time or not waiting to allow staff to get there. So sealing way in advance of that scheduled time. Drillers agreeing to take pictures, but then they don't follow through. So we really appreciate it when you do take those pictures and those videos. Again, it's a documentation for you as well as the property owner, for us. It's just a good thing to have those things documented. So going into actual well grouting and construction, sealing methods and materials under 25B6 well construction requirements, sealing materials shall be installed with the aid of a tremie or grout pipe unless the annular space is dry and no deeper than 30 feet below ground. When the tremie method is used, it must be done under mechanical pumping to keep a positive water displacement while that sealing material is filling the space. Tremie pipes must be long enough to be installed within 5 feet of the desired seal depth and be raised as the material is placed. The top of that pipe should remain in that material until the seal is completed. Sealing material should take place in one continuous operation, and there should be enough material on site. The goal being one continuous pour so that we prevent any bridging, potential contamination down the road. Bentonite chips or pellets should only be used when the annular space is dry and no greater in depth than 30 feet. There is an exception of that where it's built into the well ordinance, and that's when there's a short section that's no greater than 10 feet that you can have water in there and use bentonite chips. So some issues that we had observed was that there's sometimes not enough material out on site, and then we have to wait to have the well driller go get more material. There's concerns with that, with the bridging. Sometimes there's a request to come back on another day, and we can't have that. It really does need to be done in one continuous pour. Also, greater than 30-foot seals trying to use bentonite chips or trying to free fall material. Greater than 30-foot seal with water present and trying to use bentonite chips or trying to free fall material. Less than 30-foot seal, annular space full of water and trying to still use bentonite chips. And also not having proper tremie setups or pipe connections. So need to have long enough pipes, the proper setup and connections to make that happen. So that's the end of my portion of this presentation under construction and inspections. And I'm going to hand it over to Judas to cover well destructs. Thank you.
Thank you, Darla. And then, as Darla mentioned, I'm talking about well abandonments, section 25B7. So this is going to touch on abandoned wells, test wells or holes, and the destruction of wells. The purpose of this discussion is to review and address well destruction standards, focusing on the challenges encountered with drillers in previous operations. Over the course of the past projects, various issues have impacted the efficacy and overall success of the well destruction process. By revisiting these standards, the goal is to identify and rectify areas verify and rectify areas where practices may have fallen short. Let's see, 1 second here. See if I can share my. Yep. I'm sorry, and ensuring the improvements of the integrity and consistency of future operations. This review is crucial to enhance current protocols, mitigate potential risk, and optimize the overall well destruction process to prevent future setbacks. Obviously, before destroying a well, a report submission is required. A well contractor or applicant must submit a report to the enforcing agency, which would be Permit Sonoma, prior to the well destruction. Would include type of well to be destroyed, detailed geographical information, or also known as a site map, including buildings, any type of existing wells, etc. The proposed method is one of the most important ones. How you plan to destruct the abandoned well. Also, protection of groundwater. The destruction process must ensure that usable groundwater is protected from contamination and that the surface water is prevented from entering the well. And then the actual destruction process, removal of obstructions. Any obstructions in the well should be removed if possible, including pumps, excavation of well casing. A hole should be excavated around the well casing at least 1 foot wider than the drilled hole to a maximum of 5 feet below ground level. The well casing should be cut off 6 inches above the bottom of the excavation and removed. The casing should not extend above the ground level. We've recently had it where abandoned wells are above surface level, which those need to be cut down. Alternative methods may be proposed by the driller if physical access is limited. And then casing removal. The remaining casing should be ripped or perforated from the surface to a depth of 30 feet or deeper if required by the enforcing agency. This applies only to wells without a permitted annular seal. Alternative destruction methods may be proposed once again for wells with limited access. And then just to reiterate, the well driller may propose alternative methods of destruction. For those wells where physical access limits the ability to remove the casing, we understand that it may be a former well that now there's a garage in front of it or it's in a backyard. We do expect if you are proposing alternative methods that we do follow those out in the field. And then sealing materials, sealing the well process must be carried out as follows. Material placement, the sealing materials must be placed in a manner that prevents bridging, same as construction, and ensures a dense, effective seal that excludes water intrusion. Filling the well from the top to the bottom with an appropriate approved material. The well must be filled within 30 feet of the surface with uncontaminated clay, sand, or other approved materials, such as bentonite or cement. Seal the well in one continuous operation to a depth of at least 30 feet with approved sealing materials. The seal material should overflow into the excavation, forming a cap. After the sealing material sets, the excavation should be filled with compacted native soil. Water present in the well. If water is present in the well, the sealing material must be placed in the zone to be sealed using methods such as tremming, that prevent free fall, dilution, and separation of aggregates from the cementing materials. And then continuing, if there is water inside of the abandoned well, a tremming device is recommended. The tremming device should be lowered into the bottom of the sealing zone and raised slowly as material is added. The discharge end of the tremming device must remain submerged in the sealing material until the sealing or filling is complete. Recent issues that are observed this summer, now that it's been winding down, we're not seeing as many issues, but we did see crews calling in well destructs at a scheduled inspection, but they were not ready, which delayed the process. We've seen perforation of the casings not being completed, which resulted in a reinspection. And then improper pouring of dry chips. Crew initially planned to pour dry chips into a 33-foot dry column placed on top of pea gravel. So this method isn't allowed if it's going to be a dry pour. We do allow for, you must add 10 feet of water and then you can pour water, or it has to be a form of continuous water flow while you're pouring bentonite chips or following the bentonite instructions on the bag. And then there's been times, as Darla mentioned, where inspections were called a little bit too late as they're sealing. So we do ask for photos or video to be submitted. Sometimes these videos or photos are not received. Then we also saw discrepancy in perforation for well destruction. The well application specified perforation for the well destruction process, but the well was not perforated as required during the operation. So we do expect drillers to follow what's on the application. Inadequate concrete supply for drilling. The driller did not have enough concrete on site, causing delays. So a lot of these well destructions issues do overlap with well construction as well. And then finally, missing well logs. Well logs are sometimes submitted months to a year later or not at all. So even when a third parties are hired for these destructs, the original applicant is still responsible for ensuring that the destruction is done correctly and the well logs are submitted. Section 25B-9 does require and does state we do require a 30 days after construction, alteration, or destruction has been completed that you submit a well log to us, PRMD. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mary Allen. She will discuss the water well yields.
Thank you, Judas. Okay, let me get my screen up. There we go. So well yields, keep in mind a lot of the issues that we've talked about with constructing wells and destructing wells may also apply to the well yields. So the dry weather water well yield tests, the test dating and reporting, the purpose of this review is to revisit the water well yield process, specifically to address the challenges encountered with well technicians in past projects. Over time, issues have affected the accuracy, efficiency, and reliability of well yield. Oh, I'm sorry, I pressed the share screen. Let me try that again. It says I'm sharing my screen. So does no one sees my screen? Can
No, I
someone answer?
can't see
Oh,
it.
okay. Judas is here. Oh, so I did that one. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Judas. Okay, so now we're gonna, okay. So can you see it now?
We can see it now.
Okay, the well yields page.
That's the one.
Okay, thank you. All right, so as I was saying, over time, issues have affected the accuracy, efficiency, and reliability of well yield assessments. This review is essential to highlight and discuss the specific problems that have arisen, whether due to miscommunications, technical errors, or deviations from standard procedures, ensuring that the well yield testing quality is enhanced in future operations. So with testing dates, the dry weather water well yield test guidelines can be found in Permit and Resource Management Department Policy and Procedure number 9-2-28, well pump test guidelines in water scarce areas. The testing season is from July 15th to October 1st each year, and this period may be extended by the Director of Permit Sonoma as authorized by Sonoma County Code Section 7-12C. So, for example, during some recent specific drought times, the start date was moved up. In recent drought years, it was moved up to June 1st. So, however, springs and wells 50 feet or less deep always end on October 1st. But with the deeper wells, greater than 50 feet, with a lack of rainfall, those may be extended. And sometimes they get extended for a period and then it's reassessed at that time and then maybe extended again. So that's something you need to watch our website for. Background and requirements. Sonoma County Code Section 7-12, 25-17, 25-56, and 26-88-060H mandate dry weather water well testing for building permits related to new dwellings in areas designated as having marginal or scarce water resources. Testing must demonstrate a sustained yield of at least 1 gallon per minute per dwelling from a well, a spring, or a combination of wells and springs that have to be tested simultaneously. Water yield tests may be performed on springs only if the spring is developed to capture and convey water, such as with a spring box or a horizontal well. Dry weather testing is required for the following situations: a new or replacement dwelling in a water scarce area 4. Sometimes you hear us talk about that as groundwater availability zone 4. Accessory dwelling units, such as accessory dwelling units, or ADUs as we call them, in marginal water availability area 3 and water scarce area 4. When required to meet natural resource or health and safety conditions. And now we're going on to testing and reporting requirements. Pump tests must be conducted by or under the supervision of a licensed water well drilling contractor who has a C57 license, a pumping contractor with a C621D21 license, a registered civil engineer, or a registered geologist. Test results must be submitted to Permit Sonoma by the licensed professional. For example, property owners and others who are not licensed professionals or not working for that company under the direct supervision of a licensed professional cannot conduct well pump tests. Also, tests that fail to meet the required standards will not be approved. In the application process, a permit is required for each well or spring prior to testing. The following documentation is necessary to obtain the permit: WLS-006, Request for Well and Septic Service Form, is a PDF. A site plan indicating the locations of the wells and springs. Driving instructions or markings for getting to the wells within the property. A lot of times it's not clear where on a big property the actual location is. And it's very difficult to get there efficiently in a quick time. The well log from a permitted well. The licensed contractors professionals conducting water well yield tests must notify Permit Sonoma at least 24 hours before testing. So, and completed well reports must be signed by the licensed professional and include the driller's well report or other supporting documentation. Issues that we've observed with dry weather water well yield tests include data quality concerns, such as the well log records were incomplete or inaccurate. The existing wells permit number was incorrect. The driller failed to document important data points, potentially affecting the reliability of the tests. And things such as field inspection concerns of the field inspection was not called in soon enough for us to receive the notification 24 hours in advance. The address of the property was not clearly marked. The route on property to the well was not clearly marked. Field staff should have the permit on site with them. Field staff should have work identification on site. Field staff a problem is they've lacked the proper equipment to run the test, or they've lacked the proper supplies to actually document the test. And now I'm going to show you an example of the WLS-010 with just some common things that we find in the reports coming in. So if you notice, it says Permit Sonoma shall be notified 24 hours in advance of this test. And as was discussed earlier by Darla, these can be called in days in advance, up to 5 days in advance and scheduled. So if you think that 24 hours notice is calling it in the night before, we don't see it till just before the test happens. So we don't actually get the information until we're online the next morning seeing what's come up for inspections. So if you call it in the night before, we're not getting any notice. So it'd be great if you could call it in, 2 to 4 to 5 days ahead of time so that we're getting that notification, and we actually have 24 hours to process who is going to be at that inspection and be prepared for it. So that would be very helpful if you could call it in earlier so that we have at least 24 hours notice to make arrangements. Another issue that comes up a lot of the time, it says water yield number in this section below this notification. And a lot of times people put the well permit number for the original drilling of the well in this location. And as you can see to the right, it's the well permit number for the existing well. So I've just used some made up numbers here. A lot of times we get the well yield permit number in this location, and it's actually the existing well permit number that should be there. If you scroll down, and another thing we frequently find is incorrect is the person performing the test a lot of times signs down here in our box. So in the blue box, the company, and it should be, that's the person who performed the test. However, as we stated earlier, reports should come in from the licensed professional saying that here's the, they agree that this is the work that's been done. This is for us, the specialist is for the environmental health specialist to sign, date, and the date that it's approved or denied. Keep in mind that when we approve a test, say we take 2 weeks to approve the test is good for 3 years. And that's not from when our approval date is. That is from the actual date the test was conducted, which you can find up here. And then on this page, it's great when the comments are in here. What time, you know, it started would be over here, the date and the time, but comments are very helpful. What time that the 4 hours for the test specific capacity was measured. And then down here at the bottom, frequently we find that the post-test recording of the water level, there's no date and time here. So this is 72 hours. That's the maximum it can be, but it may recover faster than that. So we actually need a date and the time in here of when the post-test was actually taken. And I think that's about it for, oh, I wanted to show you also the spring yield test. Let me bring that over. Same thing, more than 24 hours notice would be greatly appreciated. And I think that was about it on this one. I'm sure you're all familiar with these forms, and a lot of our information is online. So that concludes our presentation, and now we'll open it to questions.
Okay, thank you, team. And I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. So I want to express the appreciation and gratitude to our team for their work and their presentations today. And with that, we're going to conclude the recording. And once again, thank you very much.